Chapter 27 over the Cold War America. Why the Cold War began. World War II's destruction destabilized Europe and Asia. There was power vacuums such as Germany and Japan. Civil wars were the Greece and China, and decolonization. U.S. and USSR have different ideologies and economic strategic needs. They each believe that they could save the unstable world. Both downgrade in diplomacy, they build strength. The United States vows no appeasement or depression of the 1930s. The Cold War, these are the origins of the Cold War. As you can see, the United States allies are in dark blue and light blue, which is on this side. Soviet Union and allies are in red, dark red and light red. You can see how little of allies they really did have. The orange is the other communist countries that the Soviet Union invaded to make communist countries. The rise of the Cold War, the containment doctrine. U.S. no longer wanted an open, but they wanted a contained Soviet and communistic expansion. They wanted to be able to contain where the Soviets were expanding communism. The doctrine was military and economic efforts to prevent communism. The domino theory, which is if one failed, that they all fell. Next. The rise of the Cold War still. The Truman Doctrine, this was a real test for the American and the Soviets to come to agreement, but unfortunately they couldn't. Is the idea that the United States would intervene with them on a global basis to prevent communists from spreading. The central idea was called containment, containing the communism in Eastern Europe and later China. The Marshall Plan. In 1947, it was planned by the Secretary of State George Marshall to aid all European nations to strengthen pro-U.S. governments against communism. The rise of the Cold War. The road to NATO. The North Atlantic, stood for the North Atlantic Treaty of Organization. Truman merged with German, which is Western zones in Western Germany. German zones were divided between the Soviet Union, the U.S., France, and Great Britain at the Potsdam Conference, the Berlin Blockade. The city of Berlin was also divided into 4 square zones. In 1948 to 1949, the Soviets blocked aid in Berlin. Western allies organized the Berlin airlift. Stalin then called off the blockade because he could no longer keep the expansion of Western Europe. Post-war prosperity. Problems of reconversion. Servicemen Readjustment Act of 1944 provided education and economic aid to returning soldiers. Increased spending prevented an economic collapse. The problems with this was high inflation, union strikes, and displaced minorities, and women and soldiers had to go back to labor. The Fair Deal was rejected. Fair Deal included the liberal reforms opposed by Republicans who wanted to reduce government spending, cut taxes for wealthy, and refused to raise wages. The Republicans also sought to decrease the power of the unions through Taft-Hartley Act, making closed shop illegal. This required union membership before being hired. The election of 1948. Truman sought re-election, and the Dixiecrats and Progressives refused full support, which means they did not support Truman at all. Republicans nominated Dewey. Truman won, and Democrats won House and Senate. Finally, the Fair Deal was revived. Minimum wage increased, Social Security expansion, and it desegregated the armed forces. The nuclear age. Nuclear weapons viewed the fear through all the public with technological advances, meaning that the public thought they were so cool, but yet they feared them. At the end of this presentation, you'll see that in elementaries and schools, students were taught to get underneath their desk in case an atomic bomb went off. The Korean War in the divided peninsula. Korea divided the 38th parallel with the communists on the north and Syrian rights on the south. North invaded South in 1950 in hopes of reuniting. The U.S. won a United Nations resolution for support of South Korean armies. Result was containment and liberation. From invasion to stalemate. MacArthur's advance in North. Chinese conflicted with Korea in the late 1950s. The United Nations armies retreated to the 38th parallel, and there was a stalemate until 1953. Truman, although wanted peace, but MacArthur opposed it, and he was relieved of command in 1951. Limited mobilization. War led to limited mobilization. Truman created the Office Defense Mobilization to combat rising inflation. The government seized railroads and steel mills during union strikes and increased government spending, and it stimulated the economy. They were unable to quickly end a small war and the fear of growth of communists at home. The Crusade Against Subversion. The HUAC and Agler Hiss. The Red Scare was prompted by Stalin and growing communism. They were known as the Reds, the Parlor Pinks, whatever else. Republicans sought to use those feelings to win support against Democrats. Congress created the HUAC. At one point, the HUAC investigated filmmakers in Hollywood because they were thought to be communists and not true Americans. Although the HUAC couldn't prove that the actors were not true Americans, the filmmakers ended up firing them anyways if they were suspicious of them. The former State Department official Agler Hiss was investigated, revealing the complied with communists and further increasing fear. Federal loyalty program in the Rosenberg case. In 1947, Truman began a program to determine loyalty of federal employees as the FBI monitored radicals. In 1950, Congress passed the McCarran Internal Security Act, forcing communist groups to register with the government, so they knew where the communists were at all times. The Rosenbergs were questioned following Soviet explosion at the atomic bomb. Anti-communist panic was now at the national, state, and local levels. McCarthyism. In 1951, Wisconsin Senator Joseph McCarthy leveled charges of communist agents in the State Department and other agencies. His subcommittee was at the fore of anti-communism. Republican revival. Korean stalemate and anti-communism sentiments led to the Democrats' disappointment. Democrats nominated Adele Stevenson. Republicans nominated General Eisenhower and Richard Nixon as his running mate. Eisenhower won by a huge margin. Republicans gained control in both houses of Congress. This is the end of my presentation. This is the Cold War, the nuclear weapons about the duck and cover that I told you I'd show you. Okay. Can you make it bigger? I'm not playing it now.
Dum, 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 diddle dum dum, diddle dum dum, diddle dum dum. There was a turtle by the name of Bert, and the turtle was very alert. When danger threatened him, he never got hurt. He knew just what to do. He ducked and covered, ducked and covered. He did what we all must learn to do. You and you and you and you. Duck and cover.
Be sure and remember what Bert the Turtle just did, friends, because every one of us must remember to do the same thing. That's what this film is all about. Duck and cover. This is an official civil defense film produced in cooperation with the Federal Civil Defense Administration and in consultation with the Safety Commission of the National Education Association. Produced by Archer Productions, Incorporated. Hey, Bert, come on out and meet all these nice people. Please? Oh, all right. We really can't blame you. You see, Bert is a very, very careful fellow. When there's danger, this is the way he keeps from being hurt. Sometimes it even saves his life. That's why these children are practicing to duck and cover just as you do in your school. We all know the atomic bomb is very dangerous. Since it may be used against us, we must get ready for it, just as we are ready for many other dangers that are around us all the time. Fire is a danger. It can burn whole buildings if someone is careless. But we are ready for fires. We have a fine fire department to put out the fire, and you have fire drills in your school so you know what to do. Automobiles can be dangerous, too. They sometimes cause bad accidents, but we are ready. We have safety rules that car drivers and people who are walking must obey. Now, we must be ready for a new danger, the atomic bomb. First, you have to know what happens when an atomic bomb explodes. You will know when it comes. We hope it never comes, but we must get ready. It looks something like this. There is a bright flash, brighter than the sun, brighter than anything you've ever seen. If you were not ready and did not know what to do, it could hurt you in different ways. It could knock you down hard or throw